Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Megalith 8392M. This watch is available from megalithwatch.com for $160 including shipping. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the other items one gets with the piece. So the watch comes in this cardboard watch box. One withdraws the tray from the sleeve. There's a piece of foam which protects the watch in shipping from damage, and the watch sits inside a foam cutout panel in the base as one would expect. Although basic, it does suffice in protecting the watch, and I think it's perfectly acceptable to use a basic cardboard watch box, bearing in mind this is a low tier price point piece at only $160. With regards to the items, this is the owner's instruction manual, clear concise diagrams. The instructions are in English and it details the operation of the movement used, which is the Epson caliber YN55A automatic. Now, one also gets this leaflet, which is double-sided, clear concise diagrams and instructions in English. This leaflet details how to resize a bracelet using push pins. It's completely irrelevant because this piece does not have push pins in the bracelet. The bracelet uses screw pins. So Megalith have made a mistake in including this, and this really doesn't bear any use to the watch whatsoever. Now, apparently the watch is covered by a 12-month international warranty, but there is no warranty card, and in the owner's instruction manual there's no details about how to make a warranty claim. So that's something to bear in mind if you like to buy a watch with a 12-month warranty. I think Megalith really should include a warranty card filled in with the date of purchase, stamped, and also the reference number of the piece, and also include the terms and conditions in the owner's instruction manual of the warranty and how to make a warranty claim. One also gets this tag, as you can see, and on the reverse it has the website megalithwatch.com. This screwdriver also comes with the watch. As you can see, it has a flat head to resize the screw pins in the bracelet. And lastly, one also gets this small microfiber polishing cloth. This is one of the smallest microfiber polishing cloths I have ever seen with a watch. I really think they should include a larger microfiber polishing cloth if they're going to include it, and also brand it with Megalith. This is a clear cost-cutting measure, and really there's no point in including a polishing cloth which is this small. So with regards to the specifications of the piece, this is the Megalith 8392M. The watch is clearly an homage to the Rolex Submariner date. We have a 43mm case diameter. We have a 52.2mm lug-to-lug measurement, a thickness of 13mm, and a lug width of 21mm. The oyster-style bracelet tapers from 21mm at the lugs down to 16mm at the flip-lock clasp. Now, I think they've made a mistake with the proportions of the bracelet. 21 to 16 is too much of a taper. As you can see, it's too wide at the lugs at 21 and too narrow at the clasp at 16. 21 to 18 would be a better taper, or alternatively they should have made the lug width 20 and taper it from 20 down to 16. 20 to 16 is a good taper, or alternatively 21 to 18, but not 21 to 16, as you can see, because the taper looks too much and it looks like it's too wide at the head of the piece and too narrow at the clasp end. Now, with regards to the clasp, it's signed to a high standard with Megalith engraved. The luster is done to an acceptable standard on the brushed satin finishing, and that contrasts with the mirror polishing to the flanks, which is done to an OK standard. But however, there is a sharp edge on the end of the clasp and two sharp corners, so there's room for improvement with regards to the finishing and the quality control. I'll show you the interior to the flip block clasp, which looks very similar to Pagani design clasp. As you can see, matte bead blasted effect to the center section, and then we have mirror polish to the exterior, so the center section of the right hand portion and the flanks. The mirror polishing is done to a poor standard. Now, if I tilt it in the light, you can see there are marks in the mirror polishing, and this is wholly unacceptable regardless of the price point. This is $160 and you can see marks in the mirror polishing. And even if you look at the matte bead blasted effect to the center section of the left hand portion, there are also marks in the finishing, so wholly unacceptable. Now, the other thing is, in the actual mechanism itself, we've got lateral side to side play and up and down play. So the hinge pin wobbles, as you can see, and it's significant. We're looking at 1 to 2mm of play in the hinge pin. So really they need to tighten up the tolerances of the bracelet. Now, if you look at the other hinge pin joining the left and right hand portion, there's also lateral side to side play, as you can see. So it's a sloppy flip lock clasp. It does snap shut okay, and the flip lock snap shuts okay. So the alignment is okay, but the problem is it's loose, and the question is how long are the hinge pins going to last with that amount of play before they inevitably come loose and come out. Now the other thing I'll show you is it doesn't have a glide lock mechanism, but like a Pagani design flip lock clasp, it has a 5mm Easy-Link style extension, which is solid milled stainless steel, finished to an acceptable standard. It does deploy with a nice positive click, and it also snaps into the body with a nice positive click, as one would expect. But again, look closely at the end of the bracelet. You can see we have lots of scuffs and scratches. This is a brand new watch costing $160 US, and we have scuffs and scratches on a brand new bracelet, as you can see. So disappointing finishing, poor QC, and they really need to improve the quality of the finishing. There are marks all over the bracelet. If one looks closely at the luster, if you look at the brushed satin finishing to the top side of the bracelet, you can see there are marks on all of the links. So really it's poor quality finishing at this price point. The bracelet is very poor quality in terms of its build quality. If you look at the end link, we've got lateral side-to-side play, up and down play, and longitudinal play. We're looking at 1 to 2 millimeters of play, as you can see. Lateral, longitudinal, and also up and down play. Play in every direction. That's just the end link. In every single one of the screw pin links, we have significant play. Lateral side-to-side play, longitudinal play, and up and down play. Now, the cumulative effect of this is the bracelet rattles on wrist. And I'll just check the other side for consistency. Again, we have significant play, 1 to 2 millimeters of lateral side-to-side play, longitudinal play, and up and down play. And even if you look at the gaps, if you look at the tolerances of the centre link in the end link, they haven't even got that right. There's significant gaps. So it actually has side-to-side play as well as the lateral and longitudinal play. And again, every single one of the screw pin links has play in it, and we're looking at 1 to 2 millimeters. And across the length of the bracelet, the cumulative effect is that this rattles. So it's a very poor quality bracelet. Now, of course, because it's loose and sloppy, it doesn't have any stiff links. It articulates freely. None of the bracelet links kink. But this is a screw pin bracelet. We're not looking at a push pin bracelet. And it's unacceptable to have that amount of play in the bracelet. It's a very poor quality built bracelet. So I'll show you the case back. We have a screw down exhibition case back glazed with mineral crystal. The screw down exhibition case back provides an effective hermetic seal to 100 meters, which is acceptable. The mirror polishing to the circumference is done to an acceptable standard. The milled slots are okay, no sharp edges, no burrs. And we've got concentric CNC lathe tool machining to the inner portion, and engraved to an OK standard with the specification and the reference number of the piece. Relatively low profile, and it does a good job of displaying the Epson caliber YN55A automatic. So with regards to the rest of the specification, we have a flat sapphire crystal. Now the negative of the flat sapphire crystal is there is no AR coating on the underside, which is a clear cost-cutting measure. Now when I tilt the piece at an oblique angle, you can see there is a lot of glare and highly reflective nature to the silver mirror polished applied emblem, and also the silver mirror polished Mercedes hands and applied indices. This really does need AR coating. It's a very shiny piece, and the flat sapphire crystal is highly reflective. It's like a mirror, as you can see. So poor legibility as a result, and it's very disappointing they haven't used AR coating. Now, looking at the Mercedes handset, you can see they are clearly undersized. They're too short, and in terms of their thickness, their width, they are too narrow. So this is a 43mm head of the piece. They've made a mistake with this because this should be a 40 or 41mm because it's a Submariner date homage. We're not looking at a Sea Dweller homage. If it were a Sea Dweller homage, we would have 60-minute ticks around the bezel. And the Sea Dweller is 43, so of course this could potentially be a Sea Dweller homage. But it's got the Submariner date style bezel, and therefore this is a Submariner date homage. The problem is they've scaled up the proportion of the dial to fit a 43mm head of the piece, and the hands, even for a 40 or 41, would still be undersized. So on a 43mm with a larger dial diameter, you can see they are clearly too narrow, too short. I'm just going to move the minute hand to show this clearly because it's underneath the Cyclops. Right, so now you can see the minute hand is too short. It doesn't extend to the white minute ticks on the chapter ring. If you look at the hour hand, you can see the Mercedes hour hand is also too short. It doesn't come anywhere near the applied indices. Even the second hand is too short. It doesn't extend to the white minute ticks on the chapter ring. So The handset is too small. They've also made the applied Megalith brand emblem at 12 o'clock. It's too large on the dial. Now, with regards to the text, I'm just going to move the minute hand out of the way again so you can see the text at 6 better. If you look closely at the text, you can see we have this ridiculous philosophical quote, "Stand strong." They really should not have these kind of philosophical quotes. I previously reviewed another Megalith watch, and again, they had something engraved on the keeper of the rubber strap. "Stand strong" is completely meaningless. This is a Submariner date homage. They should delete that from the dial. There's too much text on the dial. There's no need to put water resistant on the dial. It has the water resistance rating, 330 feet equals 100 meters. Clearly that is the water resistant rating. One doesn't need to state water resistant on the Submariner date homage. They've also put automatic in the wrong position. They've put it at the bottom of the text. They should delete the "Stand strong" text in bold and then move the automatic up to the top line. It should simply have automatic, then 330 feet equals 100 meters. One doesn't need to have irrelevant information such as "stand strong" or "water resistant" on the dial of the watch. So there's room for improvement on the dial because there's too much text. It looks too cluttered and it's got irrelevant nonsense on it like "stand strong." Now, looking at the Cyclops magnifier, it's 2.5 times magnification, which is good, but unfortunately there's a QC issue. The Cyclops magnifier is off-center. They've set it too low on the sapphire crystal. Now, if I hold it straight on, you can see the Cyclops magnifier isn't central. It's too low. So this is a fundamental QC issue they need to resolve. They need to get this right. It's very easy to press in a sapphire crystal correctly and to align a Cyclops magnifier when it's pressed onto the sapphire crystal, and as you can see it's significantly low. So the alignment of the Cyclops is wrong. Right, so let's do a bezel test and test the bezel execution. 120 click unidirectional bezel as one would expect. We've got significant lateral side-to-side play. We're looking at 1 to 2 millimeters of lateral side-to-side play. I'm just going to check it in 4 positions. Yes, all the way around we've got 1 to 2 millimeters of lateral side-to-side play. Now that's not the only problem. If you look, we've also got 1 to 2 clicks of back play. I'm just going to check it in various positions to confirm. All the way around the bezel, we've got 1 to 2 clicks of play on the 120 clicks. This is dreadful bezel action. Now, I'm just going to try and check the alignments. Right, so this click, the loom, pip and triangle, is too far to the right. If I move it to the next click, it's now too far to the left. So it doesn't align either. We can either have it too far to the right or too far to the left. And I'm just going to try it 2 more times to confirm this, because when I level criticism at a brand, I like to be consistent and fair. Right, so we're now too far to the right. Next click is too far to the right. Next click is too far to the left. I'll just check it 1 more time. Right, so we're now too far to the right. Next click is still too far to the right. Next click is too far to the left. It is impossible to get this aligned correctly. Even with the 1 to 2 clicks of back play, as you can see, one cannot align the loom, pip and triangle. It's either too far to the right or too far to the left. They haven't got a central click, and it's a very sloppy bezel. That is the amount of back play we've got. 1 to 2 clicks. This is one of the worst 120 click unidirectional bezels I have experienced on a watch. Pagani Design also have some poor PD1661 120 click unidirectional bezels, but even on the worst of PD1661 bezels, they have never been this loose. This is absolutely dreadful because the lateral side-to-side play compounds the back play because they both work against each other. We have side-to-side plus anti-clockwise back play, as you can see. So it feels very sloppy, and it does feel even all the way through the 360 degrees. The ratcheting mechanism feels even. The resistance is medium. It doesn't feel too light or too firm, but it's just a dreadful bezel execution, and the alignment isn't correct. So they've got all 3 things wrong: lateral side-to-side play, back play, and also alignments. 3 out of 3 incorrect. Now, with regards to the crown, it's coin edge finished, and they have embossed it with the Megalith emblem. Now, we have another QC issue with this. The embossing is very sharp. Now, I'm wearing a pair of gloves, but with a bare finger, When you're unscrewing or screwing back down the crown, you can actually feel the embossing. It's razor sharp, and it's absolutely unacceptable regardless of the price point. So I appreciate this is a low tier $160 piece, but it's very sharp, and this is very easy to get right. They simply should sand this, they should deburr it in order to reduce the sharp edges, but it's got lots of sharp edges on it, and it's very unpleasant to use because when you're adjusting the time or the date, you can feel it digging into the skin. It's very scratchy. So sharp edges on the embossing of the emblem is wholly unacceptable. It's very poor quality. So let's test the screw down crown execution. The screw down crown provides an effective hermetic seal to 100 meters. Now it feels stiff, it doesn't feel silky smooth. To put this into perspective, a Pagani designed PD1661 screw down crown or a steel dive SD1953 feel silky smooth, and they are low tier watches costing at a similar price point. They're below $160, they're circa $100. They have silky smooth crowns, so it is possible to get a screw down crown with 100 meters of water resistance but silky smooth at this price point. This feels rough. It's not a pleasant screw down crown to use. So in the first position, we can manually wind the Epson caliber YN55A to top it up to its maximum 40-hour power reserve. The manual winding of the YN55A feels good. It feels very similar to an NH35A. There's no discernible difference between the 55A and the 35A. One can feel the tension in the mainspring gradually building up, so they do feel pleasant to manually wind. Pulling it out to the first click position is the quick set date complication. I'm just going to move the minute hand out of the way and we'll do it again. Right, so if you look closely at the date complication through the misaligned Cyclops magnifier sitting too low, rotating the crown anti-clockwise advances the quick set complication, and the YN55A does feel very similar to the NH35A. It's got a nice positive indexing to the date complication. It feels light, but there is a nice positive click. So the quick set complication works as one would expect. Nice positive clicks. It's an absolute pleasure to set the date. Pulling it out to the second click position hacks the movement. If you look at the second hand, you can see I've now stopped it dead. It's possible to set the time precisely to the second with the YN55A. Immediate response, so there's no backplay clockwise and anti-clockwise. The YN55A feels better to set the time than the Miyota 8215, for example. And the 8215 does have some clockwise and anti-clockwise backplay, but with the YN55A it feels exactly the same as the NH35A. When one rotates the crown clockwise or anti-clockwise, the minute hand immediately responds, so it's very pleasant to set the time. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click, and that restarts the movement. The second hand begins to sweep around the dial once again. So let's test screwing it back down. It just feels stiff. It just feels gritty. The threads aren't very well machined. The internal thread doesn't interface very well with the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. And one can feel the friction of the O-rings. They feel like they're too tight. There's two rubber O-rings, one inside the crown and one inside the stainless steel crown tube. And one can feel the friction of the O-rings gripping against the winding stem and also the crown compressing the O-ring against the end of the crown tube. And the problem is this embossed emblem is so sharp, it digs into the skin. So when you're pushing the crown back in, it feels unpleasant. And when you're screwing it back down, it feels unpleasant. And then it's also too stiff. The threading isn't smooth. It's a poorly executed screw down crown. The QC, the build quality, is very poor. And a 1661 or a 1953 screw down crown is far better. They are silky smooth in comparison. So poor bezel execution, poor screw down crown execution. Right, so I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now I haven't sized the bracelet. I've simply taken the watch out of the watch box and put it on wrist. And as you can see, enough links in the bracelet to fit my 8-inch wrist. I can actually fit an index finger underneath the bracelet and clasp at all times. So this will fit up to an 8.5-inch wrist with all the links in the oyster style bracelet. Now, it is a heavy piece. The thing to note is this is 43mm. We're not looking at a 40 or a 41. So it does feel a lot heavier. One would expect this to be circa 150 grams, which is the sweet spot for heft. This is 169, 19 grams in excess of the 150 gram sweet spot. It feels too top heavy. The 43mm diameter feels too large. It also has a lug to lug which is too long. This is 52.2. This is 4.2mm too long on the lug to lug. 48 is the sweet spot, as you'll know from my previous reviews. I consider 48mm to be the perfect lug-to-lug measurement, regardless of whether you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist or a 7 to 8 inch wrist respectively. Even on my 8 inch wrist, 52.2 is far too long, and one gets this abhorrent gap underneath the case because the lug-to-lug is too long, and therefore the undercut of the case is too flat and straight. It doesn't curve around the wrist as per a 48 lug-to-lug on a 40 or 41mm head of the piece. So the proportions are off with this case. As you can see, we have a large gap underneath the flanks to the case, and that also pulls up the end link, as you can see, because it uses male end links rather than female pivoted end links, so one always gets this abhorrent gap. So the lug-to-lug is far too long. It's 4.2mm too long, 52.2. 43 is also too large, even for my 8 inch wrist. This should be 41 if it's going to be a Submariner Date Homage, or 40mm, but 43 is like a sea dweller proportion. On a positive note, it's 13mm thick, so it will easily slip underneath a shirt cuff if you wear business shirts. 13mm is the sweet spot. But the proportions of the bracelet, as I've discussed, are incorrect. 21 tapering to 16 is far too much. The 21 looks too wide, it should be 20, and the 16 looks too narrow, it looks too skinny. So as you can see, 21 down to 16 is a drastic taper, and it's too aggressive. It should be 21 to 18, or alternatively 20 to 16. They are the industry standards. So the proportions of this piece are completely incorrect. It should be a 41mm head with a 20 to 16 taper, or 21 to 18, and it should have a 48mm lug-to-lug, but it's 52.2, 4.2mm far too long. So dreadful proportions, top heavy piece, doesn't feel balanced, because when you have a 43mm head of the piece with a 16mm bracelet at the clasp is clearly too light. It feels too thin and it really doesn't balance. It needs an 18mm thick bracelet and an 18mm thick clasp in order to balance the heft of the head of the piece. So it constantly feels top heavy, it doesn't sit on top of the wrist, it doesn't wrap around it, as you can see, and we have that abhorrent gap. So dreadful proportions, not comfortable to wear for long periods of time. Lack of AR coating means poor legibility, and we've got the Cyclops, which is too low, and the underside Mercedes hands. Right, so let's do a loom test, and we'll see how the loom performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, it is disappointing. Firstly, let's look at the loom pip on the ceramic bezel insert. The loom pip is already beginning to fade quickly to nothing, and that is with a full charge with 100 UV LEDs. This is the worst performance of a loom pip I have ever seen on a watch, and bear in mind I've reviewed over 300 watches, over 100 dive pieces. This is the worst performance of a loom pip on a ceramic bezel insert I have ever seen. They've clearly used blue Luminova. This isn't BGW9 Super Luminova. And it's clearly 3 to 4 layers. They haven't used 5 to 6, which is the industry standard. So 3 to 4 layers is a cost-cutting measure. Using Luminova is also a cost-cutting measure. They should be using BGW9 Super Luminova. We're not looking at a watch which is below $100 US. This is $160 US, significantly more expensive than the SD 1953 and significantly more expensive than the PD 1661. But if you compare this to the 1953, that has good quality loom on the dial and hands, and also the loom pip, and it's wholly unacceptable to have this poor quality Luminova on $160 US piece. So as you can see on the applied indices and the Mercedes hands, which are undersized, the loom is already beginning to fade very quickly. So it's not bright initially, and it's not going to last for a long length of time. Now, this clearly demonstrates the Mercedes hands are undersized. They're far too short, and also even the Mercedes hands is undersized, it's too thin. And they really needed to make the hands larger in diameter and also thickness and length in order to allow for larger plots, larger areas of the loom to be applied. So really, this is an example to other brands of how to get it incorrect. It's very poor quality blue Luminova. Right, so let's discuss the movement used. You'll all be familiar with the Epson Caliber YN55A. It's made in Japan. It's a reliable, well-proven workhorse movement. Now, with regards to build quality, quality control and materials, I regard the YN55A to be equal in quality to the Seiko NH35A. The architecture of the 55A and the 35A are actually very similar. The main difference is the 35A has 24 joules, but the YN55A has 22 joules. So this has 2 joules less than the 35A. But the actual architecture, the design of the movement is very similar. They both run at 21,600 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 3 Hz. It has hand winding and hacking, which is used for complications. It also has a quick set complication for the dates, which I've demonstrated works very well. The stated accuracy of the 55A is -15 to +25 seconds per day. So the accuracy is actually rated better than the 35A. An NH35A is -20 to +40. This 55A is -15 to +25. Now, unfortunately, Megalith aren't doing a good job of regulating the 55As they're using. This one is running consistently at +20 seconds per day when fully wound to its maximum 40 hours. Now, although +20 is within the -15 to +25 stated accuracy, +20 is very fast. I want to put this into perspective. The YN55A is a reliable, well-proven workhorse movement. It's been well used since 2016 by Orient. For example, they use it in the Orient Kamasu, as well as a plethora of other Orient watches. And Orient call it the caliber F6922, but the F6922 is the identical movement to the YN55A. It's just the YN55A is branded as Epson, and the F6922 is branded as Orient, but they are both made by Seiko Epson. So, it's nothing unusual to get an Orient Kamasu running within ±5 seconds per day, and the YN55A can easily be regulated to ±5 seconds per day. This one running at +20 is wholly unacceptable. That is very poor regulation, and it's like Megalith aren't regulating the movements they're using. They're coming from the Epson factory and they're simply building up the watch without regulating them. +20 is the worst accuracy on a YN55A I have seen. Within ±10 is acceptable, and ideally within ±5 is very good. So there are no negatives to the 55A. It's a reliable movement. It is accurate when it's regulated. It can be regulated to ±5. And although it's boring to look at, it's undecorated and sterile, with the exception of the rotor. It is good they've used an exhibition case back to display it. So I regard it as equal to the NH35A, and I like the YN55A. On a positive note, it does feel smoother to set the time than the 8215. There's no backplay in it, and the other thing I like about it is the rotor on the 55A is quieter than on the 8215. It sounds very similar to the NH35A in terms of the sound of the rotor. So it's a quiet movement, it's not noisy like the 8215. The build quality, materials and quality control are all very good. So good quality movement, but unfortunately poorly regulated. So lastly, I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So this is $160 including shipping. I consider it to be poor quality, and I consider it to be poor value. We've got incorrect decision after incorrect decision, quality control issue after quality control issue. The bezel execution is one of the worst I've ever seen. Lateral side-to-side play, back play, and the alignment is incorrect. The hands are under proportioned, no AR coating. We've got this irrelevant text, stand strong on the dial, too much text on the dial, poor execution on the crown, sharp embossing to the emblem on the crown, and the bracelet, as I've detailed, is dreadful because we've got play in every direction, marks on all the bracelet, marks on the end link, as you can see. It's just a very poor quality piece. So poor quality, poor value at $160. The PD1661 or alternatively the SD1953 are better options for less money. So for that reason, I cannot recommend this to you for your consideration. And lastly, we've got the misaligned Cyclops magnifier, which is sitting too low. So this watch is full of QC issues and I think best avoided. So I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Megalith 8392M. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.